Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. This video is all about whether I would be repurchasing any of these 10 eyeshadow palettes that I have selected. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This is a video series that I started doing earlier in the year. I've been doing this once a month where I take randomly selected eyeshadow palettes from my collection and I ask myself, well, two questions mainly. If I lost this palette, would it be something that if I could still repurchase it, I would want to repurchase it? Or if I somehow lost it or ever had to give it away or anything like that, would I miss it in my collection? So how unique is it? Some of these are older palettes, so I can ask the question, do they still stand the test of time? And I just like chatting about all of the different eyeshadow palettes I have. So some of this is going to be a bit of a trip down memory lane, but some of these are also some of my all-time favorite palettes as well. Before we get into the video, I would like to introduce myself so that you know a little bit who you're watching and what you can expect from the channel. My name is Maaike, I live in the Netherlands, I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, and this greatly influences how I feel about makeup. I have been reviewing makeup for more than a decade. I love trying out eyeshadow palettes as a Catrice and getting the use out of my makeup. So if that's something you're interested in, then I do hope you would like to consider subscribing. So this video is about 10 randomly selected eyeshadow palettes from my collection, and we're going to chat about those two hypothetical questions. Would I repurchase these if I wanted to, if I ever used them up or lost them? And also, like, would I miss them in my collection to begin with? And I have just randomly selected these. I keep a list of all of the palettes that I featured in these videos so that hopefully I can prevent there being any doubles, so I can check what I had already featured. And yeah, I just made a random selection, a couple of palettes from the one drawer, a couple of palettes from the other drawer. So there is a mix here of smaller palettes, of drugstore palettes, of more high-end things, of newer things, of old favorites, and also limited edition palettes. So let me just get to it. The first palette I want to show you is this really small one. If you saw my April eyeshadow palette battle, that's another monthly series I like to do. I did a battle with all of my Viseart palettes, and one of the palettes featured in there was the Petit Pro 3. So here's what the palette looks like. It just is a very baby-sized palette. It's the smaller pans that Viseart does, and in here you get two greens, two browns, something that's a little plummy mauve leaning, and then you get these very light neutrals. So essentially it's a light neutral palette with a pop of green and a hint of purple, which is why I purchased it when I bought it, and it was the first palette I bought in this smaller size that Viseart does. The only thing I had tried before this was one of their larger palettes with the clear lids. That was the Sultry Muse, and I wasn't a fan. So because I didn't like it, I was afraid I didn't like the Viseart formula, and I kind of bought this, I think on a bit of a whim actually. It was on sale, or I don't remember exactly what made me decide to buy this, but just to give the brand another chance and see whether I did like it. And this is actually the palette that instigated the rest of my Viseart collection. Now, as far as my Viseart collection stands, this is by far not a favorite at all in my makeup collection. The main reason for me to keep it around is A, it's Viseart. I love their formula. And also the greens. This matte green shade in here is very unique. I haven't seen a matte green like this in any of my singles, in any other palette I have. So there is something a bit more unique about it, but if you leave the greens out, it's a very boring palette, you could say. So would this be one that I would miss in my collection if I lost it? No. However, I might want to hunt down a matte dark green like we have in this palette. It's what made me buy the palette. It's the reason why I'm keeping it around. So I wouldn't necessarily miss it, but it's also another palette I feel I would want to run out and get because I have so many neutral palettes already, and I don't feel this does something unique enough to warrant buying the entire palette again just for the one shade. If I didn't own it already, I don't think I would put my money towards it ever again. Palette number 2 that I wanted to feature is the Baroque from Colourpop. Who remembers this collection? It had beautiful packaging. I don't remember the name, but it came with 3 different palettes. It came with blushes. I had one of those blushes as well. I still keep the packaging of that blush because even though I didn't love the blush itself on me, because I don't love any of the Colourpop like face products, you could say, but I did want to keep around the packaging because I just love this floral design. And the Baroque, I don't know how you would pronounce that. It's a French word. I would call it Baroque in English, but I'm not sure if that's the way to say it. And this is just such a good grungy color story. It's incredibly dark though, so I haven't used this a whole lot. It's also not a great standalone palette, but it's definitely something more unique, and I don't think, because Colourpop is of course a brand that repeats themselves a lot with a lot of the palettes that they do, and I feel they haven't really come out with anything like it, even with some of the cooler things they've done in recent years, something like the Troublemaker or the new Elementum palette. They definitely take aspects of this palette that they put in those other palettes, but something this dark and grungy and yummy, they haven't quite done since, I feel. It doesn't have a whole lot of matte actually as well. Like there's like 4 mattes, everything else has some sort of shine or shimmer to it, which is what I love. And a lot of these have like a duochrome kind of element to them. Would I say they are super flippy? No, but I think you can see here in the middle that when the light hits it, it almost has like a purple blue sort of flash with a gray base, which I think is really, really cool. Here we get something that's a little bit more green leaning. So it definitely is a palette that has some more unique shades in, and it's one of the very few Colourpop palettes that I have in my possession that I didn't mess with. In case you're familiar with my Colourpop collection, I've reorganized almost all of them because I very often found that Colourpop color stories just aren't really appealing to me. It's sort of also one of the reasons why I'm a bit more apprehensive to be buying from the brand. And if I could still repurchase this, again, I don't think I would run out and get it because of a palette that you'll see in a minute. But yeah, these, it's just a little bit too dark. We do have other darker color stories now that give me the grungy vibes that I didn't really need this. But I would be a sucker for this floral pattern any time of day. So packaging wise, I really like it. It's the cardboard packaging. It's super portable. You could flip these palettes or the shades out if you'd want to and replace it with other things as well, which I have always appreciated about a lot of Colourpop stuff. And the colors are definitely unique, but I think that I just have other things that I like a little bit better in terms of what this does, because this is very one note. And I have to say, I haven't gone back to this in a while. I may have to put this on a list of palettes that I need to go back to at some point because I haven't used it in a while, but I don't think that I would run out and get it again. However, if a collection like this would launch now, I would still be interested in it because I do like these darker, deeper, grungy shades. I love a grungy look on myself, as you'll see in a minute, and this one did it exceptionally well, but the color story was perhaps not as exciting as it could have been. Next up is something a bit brighter, something a bit more fun, a bit more quirky and unique, and it's this one from Kaleidos. It's the Futurism 6 Electro Turquoise. And Electro Turquoise has been one of my favorite Futurism palettes. I'm not entirely sure if they still do this because they did come out with a lot of other styles of palettes and they only have a couple of them left. Even though I have heard that they're bringing some things back. I'm not entirely sure what the status is on this one, but this is definitely one of the more unique palettes in my makeup collection, which is why I appreciate it so much. In here, we get 6 shades. We get a dark brown, this deeper teal, we get a like tealy turquoise kind of shimmer, a matte neon orange, this turquoise like light teal matte, and a really pretty almost like duochrome kind of shifty inner corner highlight thing if you'd like. It has 4 mattes, only 2 shimmers, which very often I prefer palettes if they have more shimmers than mattes, but this one I make an exception for. And the main reason for that is no matter how colorful this is, on me, this really bright orange shade works beautifully as in transition. And I think that if it wasn't for that shade, I wouldn't have liked this as much. Plus, it makes it very unique as well. So I definitely think there are some fun shades here. And where you might expect that blending the teal into the orange might muddy it up, on my skin tone, it works really well. If they were still doing this, I would definitely repurchase it if I lost it in my makeup collection. I'm currently really into my bright things again, and I think I want to select this one over the summertime to go back to because this is such a unique color story, and now that I'm feeling a little bit more color again in my life, I definitely want to make sure I go back to some of my favorite colorful palettes, and this one is very high on the list. It's just a really unique blend of shades, and the color story is perfect for the summertime because that's when I like this like juxtaposition with the teals and the browns and the orange that this has, and that teal shimmer in the middle. All over the lid is just really, really beautiful. I have gone back to this palette multiple times already in the past. It's just one of my favorites for a reason, and I just wanted to give it a shout out here. Next up is a palette that is currently in my Shop My Stash because I'm also, like, apart from colorful things, I'm also really digging warm tones again, which if you had told me that a few months ago, I would have probably laughed in your face because me and warm tones, we sort of fall in and out of favor. I like a good spicy neutral at times, but I'm really a cool girl at heart. I really love cool toned eyeshadow on myself, but the Anastasia Soft Glam is quite possibly one of the best warmer toned neutral palettes that I have in my collection, which is another reason why I haven't messed with this, because if you're familiar with my makeup collection, you'll know that I took 6 Anastasia palettes and I turned it into 2, so I completely reorganized them. They have gotten a little fragile from the potting, I have to say, but this one I haven't messed with because just look at that gradient. There's just something about this that speaks my name. I love the Dusty Rose shade, which is pretty cool tone compared to everything else that's in the palette. But on my complexion, it definitely has that warmer undertone. And then I love pairing it with rose pink and sultry in here. So I definitely go for the more reddish tones in here. I also really enjoy mulberry. That's another favorite. Cypress Umber was already one of my favorite shades in the Modern Renaissance, and it's in here again. I tend to ignore the oranges that are in here. But everything else, like this half and this half, I really enjoy, and I really appreciate this palette. I'm so glad I didn't declutter this in the past 2 years where I was just really digging the cool tones only, but I'm really having a moment with this, and I'm really happy I selected it for my Shop My Stash. Would I repurchase it? I don't know. It would be a contender. It would definitely be something I would consider, but I also think we get so many warm tone palettes all the time that are essentially doing this, that I don't think this is unique enough in the entire makeup realm of what's out there in terms of warm tones that I would have to run out and get this. I definitely think that I would be selecting something that is new, something like the new Let's Get Nude from Gloss Gods. I feel it's very similar to what this has to offer, which is why I want to try that to see how similar it is. But there are definitely warmer tone palettes, something like the Ambiance from Sigma, I think would be something a slightly more current color story that has warm tones in it as well. But one thing I appreciate about the Soft Glam is those pinky hues it has, which is why it still works for me. It is a very glam look on me. That's how I feel in warm tones. But I'm currently really digging the very full glam sort of moment. So really enjoying the Soft Glam at the minute. Not sure I would repurchase it though. And I kind of feel similarly about this next palette. This is by Glaminatrix. It's their Nocturnal palette. And this is beautiful. It's a really stunning color story. It's definitely, again, more unique in my makeup collection with these neutrals over here. And then you pretty much get corresponding shades, say for these two, in every sort of little section you get. The only problem I had when I was testing this out is that these shades look similar in the pan, but once you start playing with them, they're not that similar as you might expect just from looking at them. So that's one of the downsides I feel, but you can definitely pull some looks out. I really enjoy like going for opposites here. So the purples go with the blues, the purples go with the greens really well as well. I really like this section, especially here. It's very, very sultry and smoky and very unique in my collection, as I mentioned. But like the Soft Glam, I feel I can do the looks I can do with this with other things I already have. And we get color stories like this quite often from other indie brands, I feel. So I wouldn't run out to get this again if I were to ever lose it, or like if I were to ever use it up. I would never feel like I would have to run out and get it, because in terms of what's on offer in the makeup world, I feel we get similar things from other indie brands all the time. So I don't feel it's super unique in terms of the realms of makeup for sure. Within my current makeup collection, it's definitely more unique, I feel, but it's currently like filling that void, which is why I don't feel like buying any other things. And it's got a really pretty formula, so I would definitely want to try more Glaminatrix if I didn't have this one. Then we have this guy. I realized I hadn't mentioned any of my Glam Shop palettes yet in these videos, but Glam Shop's Coco Sanka. This stole my heart. This is the palette that made me realize that Glam Shop does amazing eyeshadow. If you're unfamiliar with the brand, they are a Polish-based indie brand. They're sold at the Polish drugstore, I've been told, which I just want to travel to Poland just to see what they have on offer there. It's going to be a while until I get around to doing that, but yeah, one day that will happen, I'm sure. I have 4 mattes in here, 5 shimmers, and I've compared this to the That's Taupe a few times. It has very similar shades, but this is definitely a little bit more glam, a little less warm-toned, I would say, compared to the That's Taupe that still has some warmth. In here, you get like pretty much only this matte, but everything else is pretty cool-toned. And I just really like these intense shimmers it has. That's what makes this unique. That's what makes it stand out. These kind of things have been my comfort zone in the past 2 years. Like these kind of palettes, I'm really, really digging. This is no longer my favorite Glam Shop palette. This has definitely been dethroned because the Simna Mocha came out last year and it's like a softer version of this. But Glam Shop is a brand that does really good cool tone color stories. The only downside with them is that once the palette sells out, they discontinue it. So every single palette they do is limited edition. It's sort of like grab it while you can. So I'm really glad with the selection I have from the brand, but it does make me feel a little like nervous getting any more. They are coming out, if they haven't yet, with a really, really cool, like pretty cool tone color story, but it only has 1 shimmer. I just saw it on Instagram the other day. I'll pop a picture up on the screen if you are curious, but I'll mention that in my next new makeup releases video as well, because that looks really, really stunning. And I think if you missed out on something like this, then getting the new palette might work. But yeah, this is really, really lovely. I would definitely buy this again. If this was still around, this is what I live for makeup wise. This is an instant no-brainer. I want to get this. I want to put this on my face and I'm gonna love it forever kind of situation. So if my house was on fire and I lost all of my makeup, I would probably even try tracking this down on eBay. Like I would try to find resellers to see if they still sold it, because sadly you can no longer buy this. And I think I feel similarly about the next palette. I'm gonna hold it like this. This is the Melt Muerte. This, of course, did come back several times. They bring it back and then it's out of stock again. So this is not a palette that if you missed out on it, you might still have been able to pick it up. And I would certainly pick up a new version of the Muerte if I ever lost this, if I ever messed this up somehow. I would wait for a restock and I would snatch it up again in a heartbeat. I was telling you when I was talking about the Baroque from Colourpop that there was a palette coming that fits that grungy bill for me perfectly, and this is the one. And where the Baroque is quite one note because it's very blue and gray heavy, I feel that this has the fun pops of like the brighter greeny teals over on this side, but it also has the grungy wine-toned reds. And even though reds can be very warm-toned if they pull more orangey, on me these all pull pink to purple. So they're cooler toned reds, you could say. And that's why I love them. I really, really love mixing and matching all of these shades in here. It's got one of my favorite navy blue shimmers. My go-to with this palette is a navy blue smoky eye, where I use all 3 of these shades. I just reach for this from time to time. I think it's stunning. It's got amazing packaging. I love how the shades in the skull are in the actual palette. And like I mentioned, this would be a no-brainer. I would miss this in my collection. Is it wholly unique? I don't think so. I feel the palette has been duped. There are definitely other renditions out there with Melt. The formula is a love it or you hate it kind of situation. And I even feel that the brand came out with palettes that sort of look like this in some of their other limited edition collections in the past, but this is definitely not as unique as it used to be, but I still hold mine very near and dear to my heart, which is why I could never get rid of it. This is a very special palette to me, and I would certainly miss this one. Another indie brand palette is this guy, the Moonfall from Shroud. I've mentioned a couple of my other Shroud palettes in previous videos, but this one I noticed I hadn't mentioned yet. And this is really pretty, again with the grungy vibes. This, I believe, they sold as singles, as a bundle first, and then they decided to turn it into a palette because the bundle was so popular, and I can see why. My issue with a lot of my Shroud palettes is that I don't feel they necessarily work for me as standalone palettes. A bit like with the Colourpop, but this isn't one note though. It definitely, you get greens, you get like plummy berry shades, and you get like these like blues, you could say. But with the mattes and the shimmers, a bit like the Glaminatrix, the undertones of the shades don't really match. So I don't feel that necessarily the shades look right if I put them together. But it doesn't mean it's not workable shadow. And of course I have several Shroud palettes. So I think at the end of August 2023, I decided to go back to some of my Shroud palettes and put them all together to see how they would mix and match. Because I had this theory that they would be much prettier if I were to use them together. So this together with the It's Freakin' Bats and the Arcana is really lovely. But I don't think I would buy this again because it's just, it is unique in my collection. I'm not gonna lie. It definitely fills some sort of gap. But I have a lot of grungy color stories. I like the jewel tones we get in here, but I have other grungy jewel tone color stories, even from Shroud, that I like a little bit better than I do this. Is this really stunning? Yes. But I think for me, Fantasy Cosmetica is the brand that's sort of taken this place from what Shroud does. And for me, the color stories from Fantasy Cosmetica work a little bit better. So I would be much more inclined buying more Fantasy Cosmetica and replacing this with something similarly that brand does than repurchasing this for sure. But Shroud has an amazing formula. I really do enjoy it. And they are also available through Monolith, which always makes me happy if I can get US-based indie brands through a European retailer, which makes it so much easier for me to get. And then this is, again, another very much discontinued palette. I do apologize, but this is the original Solomona eyeshadow palette from Odin's Eye. And I noticed I hadn't really mentioned any Odin's Eye in any of these palettes either. So I was like, okay, this palette has been in my collection for some time now. And this is one of my favorite Odin's Eye palettes, if not my favorite. And I don't know if you can see how unique it is. Another palette I need to reach for now that I'm really digging warm tones again, because it has these really lovely, like, murky, mustardy oranges, some really lovely murky browns, and then it has that pop of lavender. I really enjoy that. It has two really stunning sort of like duochrome kind of things. It has enough depth, it has enough lightness, and I don't understand why they no longer do this color story, because the second Solomona they do looks nothing like this. I think it had to do with the pigments, that they could no longer buy those or something like that. But I really enjoy this, and I enjoy this round pan also so much better than their like weird slanted rectangular ones. This is the Odin's Eye formula I know I love, and that's why I love this palette so much. How beautiful would this be in June with like those warmer tones and the pop of lavender? And the lavender actually shows up as well on my skin tone, which I've always really enjoyed. Sometimes with these pastels, especially if you're pale, it can just look really chalky and it just doesn't look quite right. But this one has the pigmentation you need it to have, that you can just like dust it all over the lid and you will be fine putting a shimmer on top and you're happy. So this is definitely another palette I need to revisit in future videos for sure. I think I may want to put this on the list for June, because I think this will be perfect for like June, July time. It definitely hits that spot for me of something like bright and colorful and fun combined with those warm tones. So I definitely can see myself using this again. And yeah, if I could still repurchase it, I might, but I do feel that I could dupe this with other things in my collection. It's not super unique anymore, which is probably why they did away with it as well. but in terms of like an eau de Vie palette I really love, I do really dig it. So it's a lovely palette, but not one I would run out and get. And last, but certainly not least, we need to chat about Pat McGrath. I've chatted about some Pat McGrath in these videos, but not a whole lot. This is the Mothership 1 Subliminal. And if I recommend you getting just one Mothership, if you're eyeing these up and you want to get just one, I would say get this. In my most recent all-time favorite palettes, I opted for the Moonlit Seduction because it's a bit newer in my collection and it kind of really goes with the vibes I'm currently really digging. But this is the original. This is the thing that really made me fall in love with Pat McGrath eyeshadow. I had tried some other things before purchasing this palette and it didn't quite hit it for me. It didn't really quite hit the mark until I tried this baby. We get like 6 mattes and satins and then 4 special shades, as people like to call them. These are also still truly the special shades. They've changed the formula of the special shades over time. I think they're now a bit more cheaply produced. But this, especially if you love your cool tones, this is so beautiful. It has a matte, like a matte taupe. I really enjoy this soft lavendery purple. It does have peach as well, so if you like, it's not super peachy, but I think if people have a true cooler undertone, this is probably going to show up peach. On me, it's like a neutral tone brown. Then you do get a black to deepen things up. And then you have those really lovely stunning shades. I especially love this shade. It's like a lavender pinky purple with a blue flash. Really stunning. Love the blue flip we get into this. This bright blue shows up beautifully and it's such a nice contrast with some of the neutrals. So I love how you get so many options with this. You can go super smoky and glam. You can keep it super neutral if you just stick to these 2 shades. And then you can add a little bit of vibrant, fun sparkles with the special shade. So for me, this palette does a lot. And I would certainly miss this in my collection. If I were to lose this, if I dropped it and broke it, I would save up my pennies and repurchase this in a heartbeat. Because this is, as far as Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes go, it doesn't get better than the very first one she ever launched. I don't think any of the launches she has done since then have been as good as this one, and it would be an instant repurchase for sure. So those are the 10 palettes I wanted to feature in today's video. Thank you so very much for joining me here today. Let me know in a comment down below what eyeshadow palettes you would repurchase if given the choice, if that had to happen, or maybe you have repurchased eyeshadow palettes in the past because you used them up. I always really appreciate people who really go through their eyeshadow palettes. I have way too many to make that work, but I definitely like this like hypothetical kind of video for sure. So I really hope you enjoyed watching this video today. Stay tuned for more because I make new videos on this channel 4 times a week. I have a second channel where I post once a week, and I do post daily blog posts where a lot of my reviews go live for like other products that aren't eyeshadow. So I really hope to see you in one of those spaces, and then I hope to see you in my next video for sure. Take care everybody. Bye bye.